Hola amigos, buen día. So today in this lesson, we are going to talk about two outstanding women poets from Latin America. One of them is the 17th century poet Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, Sister Juana Inés de la Cruz, who is considered one of the most representative figures of Hispanic literature. And the other is Gabriela Mistral. Gabriela Mistral is the only woman in Latin America to have been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. In fact, the very first Latin American to have won this great accolade. We will begin with Sister Juana Inés de la Cruz, or Sor Juana as she is popularly known. Sor Juana because she was a nun. She was a self-taught scholar, one of the most brilliant poets of the Hispanic Baroque. She was a staunch defender of women's intellectual rights. And considering the social mores of colonial Latin America, she was a woman well ahead of her times. She was born on November 12, 1648, in a town in the state of Neplanta in Mexico. She learned to read when she was just 3 years old. In fact, without her mother's knowledge, she used to accompany her older sister to the private classes that she was going to. And such was her desire to learn to read and write that she lied to her teacher, telling her that her mother had told her to come for the lessons too. And when she was only 13 years old, Juana Inés was called to the Viceroy's court to serve as the lady of the Virreina Doña Leonor Carreto, Marquesa de Mancera, that is the Vicereine Doña Leonor Carreto, who was actually herself a very cultured lady and had a great love for literature. The atmosphere of the court definitely influenced the formation of Juana Inés. In fact, the Viceroy, amazed by the intelligence demonstrated by Juana, summoned 40 lawyers from various faculties to administer an extraordinary test to the young woman. And she passed the exam brilliantly in conditions of excellence, which aroused great admiration towards her in the entire court. She entered the convent of San José de Carmelitas Descalzas in 1667, shortly before she turned 16, thus choosing a life of her own, neither the court nor marriage. She made this decision because it was the only option that a woman had if she wanted to study. She later went to the convent of San Jerónimo, a little bit more flexible than the previous one where she did not get much time. It is in this convent that Sor Juana wrote most of her work. It is here that she composed most of her poetry, and it is here that she reached the creative zenith with a deep dedication to her studies. Her love for reading led her to assemble a collection of 4,000 books, which she used to keep in her cell and which became the richest library in Latin America of her times. Apart from books, she also possessed musical instruments and tools for scientific research, and her vast intellectual training covered the areas of astronomy, mathematics, music, plastic arts, theology, philosophy, among many others. A letter that she wrote once got her into trouble. In this letter, which she had addressed to the Bishop of Puebla, and this letter which would change the course of her life, she had criticized the sermon given by a very well-known Portuguese priest and theologian called Father Vieira. She questioned the distance that he was advocating between heavenly love, that is divine love, and earthly love. And she felt that there was really no division in human life between heaven and earth, that both existed together in human life. Now, this Bishop of Puebla, without her knowledge, made this letter public, and the letter created a huge stir. and Sor Juana was ordered to leave all her academic activities and dedicate herself only to the work of the convent. Sor Juana defended herself. She wrote another letter in which she claimed women's cultural rights, and she advocated her own right to criticize the sermon and form her own thinking about it. This response, as it is called, La Respuesta, is an important document in the history of the struggle of women's rights. It constitutes an intense autobiographical and declarative essay of intellectual principles, and it questions the patriarchal society that could not admit the great freedom of spirit, especially in a woman. The response, in the Respuesta, Sor Juana talks about her keen desire to learn. She talks about when she was young and how she used to discipline herself in the pursuit of her knowledge. And I'm going to quote to you from a small piece from this letter, from the Respuesta. First in Spanish. Acuérdome que en estos tiempos, siendo mi golosina la que es ordinaria en aquella edad, me abstenía de comer queso, porque oí decir que hacía rudos, y podía conmigo más el deseo de saber que el de comer, siendo este tan poderoso en los niños. I'll say it to you in English now. I remember that in those days, because I had a sweet tooth that is normal at that age, I would abstain from eating cheese because I had heard that it turned people into dunces. The desire to acquire knowledge was stronger in me than the desire to eat, even though the latter desire is so strong in children. And later she says in the same letter, I'll first speak to you in Spanish, quoting from her letter, and then we will see the English translation. Empecé a deprender gramática, en que creo no llegaron a 20 las lecciones que tomé. Y era tan intenso mi cuidado que siendo así que en las mujeres, y más en tan florida juventud, es tan apreciable el adorno natural del cabello, yo me cortaba de él 4 o 6 dedos, midiendo hasta donde llegaba antes, e imponiéndome ley de que si cuando volviese a crecer hasta allí, no sabía tal o tal cosa que me había propuesto de prender en tanto que crecía, me lo había de volver a cortar en pena de la rudeza. So I'll tell you now this piece in English, this fragment in English. I began to study Latin grammar, and I think I did not have even 20 lessons. I applied myself so intensely that this is true about women, and even more so in the bloom of my youth, that we value so highly the natural look of our hair, I would cut off 4 to 6 finger lengths of it, measuring up to where it reached before, and imposing a rule on myself that if I did not know whatever I had planned to learn while it was growing back to its original length, I had to cut it off again to punish my dim-wittedness. So this was her strict discipline for herself as a young woman of 16, 17. But alas, she eventually obeyed the powers that be, and she renounced her instruments, she left her library, and she dedicated herself the rest of her days to convent life. Sister Juana Inés de la Cruz later died of an epidemic while attending the sisters in the convent in 1695 at the tender age of 42. She was immortalized as the 10th muse in the Hispanic literature. I'm now going to tell you about another poet who also had a very difficult life, and that is Gabriela Mistral, who is the first woman Latin American poet to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. She received it in 1945, and the Nobel citation read, "For her lyric poetry, which, inspired by powerful emotions, has made her name a symbol of the idealistic aspirations of the entire Latin American world. Gabriela Mistral is not her original name. In fact, it was a pseudonym. Her original name was Lucila Godoy y Alcayaga, and she was born in Chile in 1889. In fact, her early life itself was very traumatic. She was brought up by her mother, and her father had left the family when she was just 3 years old. So it was just her mother who brought her up. Mother started falling ill, and it was the declining health of her mother that forced Gabriela to start working very early. So, she was just about 16 years of age when she started working as a school teacher. At a very young age, at 17, she met Romeo Ureta, who she would fall in love with, and the tragedy was just 3 years later, as she was just 20, he committed suicide. And this loss devastated Gabriela and left a permanent scar all through her life, and we can see it in her poems, this sense of loss. But Gabriela threw herself into her career as a writer, and she also started, working very seriously in the field of education because she was a teacher, as I told you. She authored several volumes of poetry, and she also wrote articles on education. She was a deeply religious woman. And in fact, if you look at her poems, we'll read some of them later, one of the main themes of her poetry is Christian faith. So Christian faith, love, sorrow, these are some of the major themes that we will see in her poetry. Her Catholic faith and belief in afterlife, that is the real life beginning after death, as it is believed in Christianity, this idea of afterlife influenced her poetry and her outlook on life. Her poems also talked about frustrated maternal instincts, and in many of her poems we find the reflection of her love for children. In fact, she wrote several lullabies and songs for children. We also find a depiction of the Chilean landscape and, of course, this sense of loss, the death of her dear ones. As well as being a poet, Gabriela Mistral became an internationally renowned figure in the field of education. She was involved in the earlier cultural committees of the League of Nations, and she played an important role in shaping the educational systems of Chile, but also of Mexico. In fact, she was also a teacher of Spanish literature, and she taught Spanish literature in the United States, where she had spent a lot of time in different universities. She also served as a diplomat for Chile. She worked as a Chilean consul in several countries, in cities like Nice, Naples, Madrid, and New York. And in fact, it was during her tenure as a Chilean consul that she came in touch with her younger colleague and fellow poet, the Chilean Pablo Neruda, who will be also awarded the Nobel Prize later. And Mistral, in fact, realized that here was a great poet and was an early advocate of the originality of Neruda's poetry. As we told you, in 1945, she became the first Latin American to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. At that time, she was 56 years of age. She died in 1957 in a hospital in New York after a protracted illness, but her poetry remains with us. Gabriela Mistral's poetry is full of lullabies and songs for children, as well as, poems of love, but of a fiery rage and anger. And finally, of course, the very dark period, the dark complex period of her later years. So we're going to read some of her poems. The very first one that I have chosen for you is called Dame la mano. It's a children's song, and it goes like this. Dame la mano y danzaremos. Dame la mano y me amarás. Como una sola flor seremos. Como una flor y nada más. El mismo verso cantaremos. Al mismo paso bailarás. Como una espiga, ondularemos como una espiga y nada más. Te llaman Rosa y yo Esperanza. Pero tu nombre olvidarás porque seremos una danza en la colina y nada más. There's a beautiful translation of it in English, and we'll read that. Give me your hand. Give me your hand and give me your love. Give me your hand and dance with me. A single flower and nothing more, a single flower is all we'll be. Keeping time in the dance together, you'll be singing the song with me. Grass and the wind and nothing more, grass and the wind is all we'll be. I'm called Hope and you are called Rose, but losing our names we'll both go free. A dance on the hills and nothing more, a dance on the hills is all we'll be. So, this little poem about two little girls playing on the hillside. The second poem that I have got for you is a love poem, a slightly darker poem, a slightly sadder poem, and it's called Canto que amabas. Of course, it's addressed to the lover, and it goes like this in Spanish. Yo canto lo que tú amabas, vida mía, por si te acercas y escuchas, vida mía, por si te acuerdas del mundo que viviste. Al atardecer yo canto, sombra mía. Yo no quiero enmudecer, vida mía, como sin mi grito fiel me hallarías. ¿Cuál señal? ¿Cuál me declara, vida mía? Soy la misma que fue tuya, vida mía, ni lenta ni trascordada, ni perdida. Acude al anochecer, vida mía. Ven recordando un canto, vida mía. Si la canción reconoces de aprendida y si mi nombre recuerdas todavía, te espero sin plazo y sin tiempo. No temas noche, neblina ni aguacero. Acude con sendero o sin sendero. Llámame a donde tú eres, alma mía, y marcha recto hacia mí, compañero. The English translation is what you loved. Canto que amabas, the song that you loved or what you loved. Life of my life, what you loved I sing. If you're near, if you're listening, think of me now in the evening. Shadow in shadows, hear me sing. Life of my life, I can't be still. What is a story we never tell? How can you find me unless I call? Life of my life, I haven't changed, not turned aside and not estranged. Come to me as the shadows grow long. Come, life of my life, if you know the song. You used to know if you know my name. I and the song are still the same. Beyond time or place, I keep the faith. Follow a path or follow no path, never fearing the night. The wind, call to me, come to me, now at the end. Walk with me, life of my life, my friend. The English translations have been done by Ursula Le Guin, and this volume, of course, is available for you to read if you want to. So, amigos, today we have so many poets, so many women poets in Latin America, and choosing any two was difficult, but we thought we would get you one of the first voices in women's poetry from Latin America, that is Sor Juana, and the Nobel Prize for Literature winner Gabriela Mistral. Thank you.